It's been 5 seconds, and this is the second white collar video, or white T-shirt video. Blue collar. I don't even have a. I can't even afford a blue collar. Okay, uh, that's how poor I am. So this next part is a supplement to my earlier testimony videos, letters to or you know comments to the administration, comments to the finance and means, means committees on tariffs. The first one's focused on how tariffs and VATs are kind of equivalent, and that you can set a tariff rate based on the VAT rate, and maybe the VAT rate even a little higher if you want to have employers take contributing to Social Security employee contributions out of the hands of employers and give it to the have it paid by taxes, and then not worrying about matching problems. You would have to then credit those contributions equally, which means you can change the bend point in relationships a little. You wouldn't have you could give more money based on work life rather than making sure that there's a higher. You could have a higher benefit with higher income for the lower benefit, and could then give more people at higher incomes a higher benefit. Although I would cap the amount of money you can put in Social Security, lower it, not raise it, so that benefits are lower, so they don't have to be adjusted with bend points. That means that a certain number of people get what they put in, and a lot of us get more than we put in. Just put in more. Have taxes put in more, not from our employers, but from VAT payers. So, but tariffs or tariff payers, tariffs should match the VAT, and of course there should be a child tax credit that's higher through employer paid, not income taxes, but value added tax, because it would include both you would tax both labor and profit, and then instead of just profit, and then you get a tax break for the money you give to families, and it has to be higher level. So, but that's the whole VAT versus tariffs thing. And if you want to have tariffs, you've got to raise the income, you've got to raise minimum wages, and you've got to raise the child tax credit, and if you want to get rid of income taxes, have the people who collect the income taxes anyway be responsible for paying some kind of VAT, but then offsetting that VAT payment with giving money to families, so that the government's not the paymaster, the employer is, or the government's paymaster. The government's paymaster for unemployment or benefits. They already give $750 a month or 700 some a month for children. If you're under 18, every child should get $750 a month in either a benefit add-on or tax add-on or a wage-based thing, or wage enhancement funded with employer taxes. Okay, so that's that. There's a part two, though, that I didn't even think of, that I've written about, on why we need tariffs. It's something that if we had employee-owned companies and got rid of we'd have to have employee-owned companies and get rid of the fiduciary part, where fiduciaries would have to, set up a system where you're making sure that all policies benefit the shareholders directly. Through, they can't cut profits, essentially. You'd have to change this rule for employee-owned companies who do one thing: that they pay a higher transfer price than they'd otherwise get for workers overseas in the supply chain or in their firms. So let's say you got cheaper labor with a lower wage when adjusted for currency. Than your American workers do, because that puts the American workers at risk for losing their jobs. It just transfers more work offshore, which is what Trump's talking about for tariffs. That's why we need tariffs, ostensibly. So the answer to tariffs is dealing with the VAT, but also doing what employee-owned firms would do, and make sure and set the tariff. And it shouldn't be percentage. It should be a dollar. I don't know how you would do it. It would have to be by industry because of productivity concerns. By product, which is where a tariff is different than a VAT. Because let me get to the end, and then we can get to fill in the middle. Every worker working a similar job of similar productivity should have the same standard of living. So not the same dollar wage, because then you'd really be giving a benefit to the to overseas workers who have cheaper prices to deal with. Although our prices are too low here, we still pay less because we have people who are not only paying less but are being paid below the standard of living in their country, in the third world. So you've got poorly paid workers by local standards making stuff for people who are maybe poorly paid here. In fact, they probably are. If you make below $100,000, you are poorly paid. If you have a family, you just are. You have your income when adjusted, including capital losses by the rich people in your income pool. You only get a third of the income that's available of the adjusted gross income. If you make under $100,000 a year, or 110 now, I think it is. So, yeah, you make 110 and you file taxes, you are, or don't file taxes at all, you are poor. Sorry to break it to you, but you ain't rich. You ain't even middle class. If you put money into various piles, you are in the poor class, which means you are being any quality of life you have is also being subsidized by people who are even worse shape than you are overseas. If you're getting food or products from China or Vietnam or India, their standard of living for the workers is less. And they're working as hard, maybe not as productively, maybe that they are working more productively. Some stuff can't be automated. Frankly, a little Chinese woman and a little white woman, doing those little, bitty circuit board things that are toxic and will kill you because of the toxic chemicals. That's intricate work. You can't get that productive when you're doing a keyboard. Or a circuit board. Keyboards especially. Keyboards take some skill. And we don't make keyboards here. They're made in China by people who aren't paid much, who aren't even paid the standard of living. And that's the problem with what we need tariffs for. We don't need to pay them the same dollar amount of wage, workers in other countries, the same dollar amount. But to have jobs not go overseas, we need to make sure they make the same standard of living. Or that American workers make the same standard of living for Europeans. There's a higher standard of living in a lot of the world. This is why they have trade deficits against us, because we have poorer workers. And they have better tax systems, and they're more generous and overall better economies, so they buy more from us than we buy from them, because our workers are cheaper. How's that? We're not even first world workers. We're second world workers. The first world's in Europe. Any country that has a trade deficit with us, their workers are better off. And if we have a trade deficit with other countries, our workers are better off. If all workers had the same quality of life in their economies, then you wouldn't have a need for tariffs, because there's inequality And not because of comparative advantage, it's because of comparative slavery. Let's call it what it is, comparative slavery, not comparative advantage. It's comparative taking advantage of your workers, comparative market power over the workers. Let's be really clear about that, okay? And I need to put this in a video, or into testimony. It's probably too late to get it. It's too late to get it in the Senate testimony. The House, I think, is still open, but it's complicated enough that I'll send a letter to both saying, I didn't make this by the deadline, but please tell your members that this is another factor which needs to be considered in doing tariffs, because it should be. And if Donald Trump included that in tariffs, he would be much better than I thought he was as far as liberalism. Because the working class needs to have the people in other countries have the same standard of living that they do. And that's what a tariff should correct, over and above that issue. So there's two issues. Value, making sure that the value-added tax problem, that we don't charge it, and we have other ways of getting income in that, but other countries take their VAT out of the purchase price, which leaves American manufacturing at a disadvantage. So there's two: worker exploitation and tax systems. And tariffs should consider both, but doing it explicitly would be very interesting if people actually said why they were doing it. Because capitalism. So if Donald Trump became a vocally anti-capitalist, oh man, he'd have to run into Green instead. Let's put MAGA in the Green Party, because they will have finished their transition. They already both love Vladimir Putin, so you might as well just, yeah. So, yes, because capitalism. So, that's part 2 of the white collar series, or the no collar white shirt series. You have a good night.